My story tonight is The Babysitter Part 2. It's my sequel to the last story that I told, so you guys get to find out what happens to Jenny tonight. Okay, so I'm going to get started. Love you. So it had been 1 year since Jenny had survived her attack from Mr. Hagen. He tried to kill her after babysitting his son, and she had pushed him over the edge of the cliff. So it's been 1 year. So Jenny has returned to the rock quarry where she had left Mr. Hagen dead 1 year later. She goes up and she's standing there and she's looking out. She kind of goes there to reflect once in a while. She's in therapy. She's trying to kind of overcome her post-traumatic stress over that situation. So she goes there one night and she's just kind of standing there looking out over the water, and all of a sudden somebody grabs her from the water and pulls her down into the water. And it's Mr. Hagen. He's dead, and he's eyes protruding, skeleton looking face, just really creepy and scary. They're struggling in the water, and he's pulling her deeper and deeper down, and there's nothing she can do to get away from him. She's just trying her hardest, but he just keeps her pulling her down, and she's starting to lose her consciousness. She's starting to die. Then Jenny wakes up. She's having a horrible nightmare, which is something that's should happen to her quite often after that situation that she had survived a year ago. She gets up out of the bed, turns her alarm off. The next morning, Jenny went to see her psychiatrist, Dr. Schindler. Her psychiatrist told Jenny that she needed to confront her final fear, her final step of therapy, which is to try a babysitting job one more time to get over this and realize that she's just had one bad experience. So her psychiatrist, Dr. Schindler, offers Jenny an opportunity to come and babysit for her stepson, Eli, who's 14 years old. So after some persuasion, Jenny finally says, okay, I'm going to do it. So the day comes where Jenny goes to do her babysitting job for her psychiatrist. She pulls up to this magnificent house out in the countryside. She gets out. She's really at awe of how beautiful it is. And she goes in, she talks with the psychiatrist. She meets Eli, the 14-year-old boy that she's going to be babysitting. He's kind of got some kind of situation where he's hypersensitive and a little destructive, and she was warned of that. That's part of her situation where she was in therapy, where she was going to have to deal with this just to try to kind of overcome everything. So Dr. Schindler goes away on a retreat and leaves Jenny there for the day with Eli. And they have a pretty interesting day. He stays in his room all day, and he's really quiet. Later on in the afternoon, Jenny has to go tell him to turn his radio down upstairs, and she knocks on the door. He don't open the door, and she finally goes in and she sees him laying there in a pool of blood. So she's freaking out, and she runs over, she's trying to wake him up, and he wakes up and he's laughing. He's got pig's blood everywhere, playing a joke on her. So after some time, she just kind of realizes, okay, this is what I'm dealing with, a practical joker. So she just kind of goes with the flow of it. So later on in the evening, it starts to get dark. Eli's still upstairs, playing his music loud. Jenny's downstairs watching TV, and she reaches into her pocketbook to get her chapstick, and she screams when she sees a tarantula in her pocketbook. And she slings her pocketbook across the room. So immediately she knows, okay, this is another practical joke by this little boy. So she calls him down. She kind of scolds him over it. He laughs it off and goes back upstairs. So a few hours pass, and Jenny's laying there, and she's kind of dozing off, and the phone starts to ring. And so she answers it. And when she answers it, she hears a voice on the other end from, to her, the grave. It sounds like Mr. Hagen making those same prank phone calls that he did before. And so she kind of gets freaked out. Her PTSD starts kicking in. And then all of a sudden she kind of hears some mumbling upstairs. So she thinks to herself, okay, this kid's playing another joke on me. So she kind of creeps in and she stands by his door, and she can hear him in there still talking to her. And she swings the door open. And at this point, she just kind of thinks it's funny. And they actually kind of have a laugh about it. That he's just really this hard up about getting her scared. So at this point, she's kind of going along with it. So Jenny goes back downstairs, and she's watching TV, and she kind of dozes off, and she's laying there asleep, and the phone starts ringing again. So this time she answers the phone, and it's her mom. And she's like, Jenny, where are you? It's almost midnight, and you're still not home. You're supposed to be home like 10 o'clock. So Jenny looks at the clock, and she's like, oh, this is weird. The doctor should have been home at 10 o'clock. You know, where is she? It's midnight. So she goes upstairs to check on Eli. And when she walks into his bedroom, she sees him hanging from the ceiling fan. So she just starts laughing it off. And she went over there and poked him. And then she realizes, when she sees him, he's blue, that he's dead. And she's just terrified all over again. And all of a sudden, she feels this big, sharp pain in the back of her head, and everything goes black. So a little while later, Jenny wakes up, and she's in the car, riding down this road, dirt road, and she can't see anything. She's kind of blurred, and her vision kind of comes to her. She hears a voice talking to her, but she really can't make it out. That's funny, Haley. She can't make out what the voice is saying, and her vision comes in. She realizes it's Dr. Schindler, her psychiatrist. The doctor tells her, she says, I have planned this for months. You are the perfect alibi to get me this fortune for my stepchild, whose father had died and left the kid millions of dollars. And this was her perfect chance to get him out of the way and blame it on Jenny, the babysitter who was so-called crazy. And the doctor had told her, she said, I put all this false information in your files, and everybody's going to believe that you went crazy and killed him and went and killed yourself. So Jenny just kind of, once again, finds herself in this situation again. And also finds herself headed to the same rock quarry where she had killed Mr. Hagen a year ago, who tried to kill her. So they get there, and the doctor pulls Jenny out of the car. She's half unconscious from that head injury. She's pulling Jenny to the edge of the quarry. She starts to push Jenny over the edge of it, and Jenny puts all the energy she has and grabs the doctor, and they both fall over the edge, and somehow they miss all the rocks that were down below and land in the water. They're struggling in the water, fighting as hard as they can. Jenny's just losing all energy she's got. And then she remembers that she's got this rock in the back of her pocket that Eli had given her earlier. And she pulls the rock out of her back pocket and hits the doctor in the head as hard as she can and kills her. And she's just laying there floating. And Jenny crawls to the edge of the water and gets out. And she sees the doctor laying there kind of floating in the water. And for a minute, she thinks she sees the dead ghost of Mr. Hagen standing there smiling with this huge grin with sharp teeth. Half of his flesh is still on him. Half of his face is skeleton. And he kind of waves at Jenny and pulls the doctor down in the water. And Jenny's just standing there on the edge of the water watching this take place. Once again, she survives another horrific night.
So tonight, my story is going to be called Slender Man. You guys might have read it before or seen the movie series. But if you haven't, it's okay. You can probably catch the story. Let a couple more people join and we'll get started. Thank you, Andy. Okay. Without further ado, this is the Slender Man. After waking up with a jolt, the girl laid in bed a few seconds longer. Reaching over to switch on her bedside lamp, she tried to remember exactly what had stolen her sweet slumber away. When she couldn't, the brunette swung her legs over the side of the bed and heaved herself up. Checking the time on her phone, she snorted when she saw it was midnight, the witching hour. Knowing that sleep would only evade her, she left her bedroom for the kitchen, a good cup of coffee on her mind. As she passed by her front door, a chill spread like liquid fire down her spine. It's only winter, she told herself, focusing again on the coffee plan. Measuring out scoops, water, and preparing her cup kept her occupied. But as the dark liquid boiled, she had nothing left to keep her mind from wandering off. The chill returned, and she couldn't help but glance behind her to the front door. It stood there innocently enough, just like always. The deadbolt was still in place, and she could see nothing amiss with it. Turning back to her coffee, she did her best to forget about the feeling. With her cup in hand, she started back towards her bedroom. As she walked by the front door, she decided that a quick glance out of the peephole would help calm her restless mind. The chill worsened with each step she took towards the door, and further away from the safety and warmth of her blankets. She pressed her empty hand against the cold metal door and took a deep breath before leading her eye to the peephole. At first, she could only see an inky blackness that somehow seemed to swirl within itself. When she blinked in surprise, the void melted away. She wished it hadn't, because in its place, there stood what she could only guess was once a man. The limbs were long and inhumanely awkward, with bulky joints branching off into several arms, not unlike the branches of a tree. The creature was draped in a black suit, somehow making the thing more nightmarish to her. The icing on the proverbial cake, however, was what passed as the hellish thing's face. It was as though her mind tried to blur that ghastly visage to spare itself further shock and horror. She shoved herself away from the door with the hand still pressed against it. The scalding mug of coffee fell, the liquid burning her bare legs as she fell backwards and tried to crawl away from the door. She knew somehow that her mind hadn't been playing tricks on her. As she walked away from the door, she watched as tendrils of black void snaked to her through the cracks of the floor. The girl was trapped between the instinct to flee and the gut feeling to not turn her back towards the door. When the door jolted, the urge to flee overcame her, and she slipped into the burning liquid of her coffee and tried to make it back to her room. She knew deep down that she was trapping herself in a corner, but she had to get away from the door. The girl was halfway down the hallway when she heard the previously locked door creak open. She screamed and slipped into a wall, cracking her chin on it and stunning herself. After that, there was only blackness.
My story is called Knock Knock. Hi, Andy. Okay, here is Knock Knock. There was a loud knock at my door, so I got up to see who was there. I looked through the peephole and I couldn't see anyone. I knew better than to just open the door. I pulled up my Ring camera app and there was nobody there. It was a phantom knock, yet I heard it with my own ears. I shrugged it off and decided to get ready for bed. I did my nighttime routine and then flung back my comforter and lay down. It had been a long, exhausting day, and I was ready for some much-needed rest. I finally drifted off, and I was awoken to a loud bang on my bedroom door. I figured it was my cat, until I looked, and she was snuggled up by my feet. Was somebody inside my house? Was somebody inside my house? I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police as I was genuinely concerned. I laid still, but didn't hear anything else. After about 20 minutes, I got up and walked through my house. I found nothing. No signs of anyone else having been there. I hesitantly laid back down, and after about an hour of tossing and turning, finally fell back asleep. At 3 a.m., I heard a loud knock on my front door again. Not just a regular knock either. The kind that shakes the whole house. I pulled up my app, and once again, nobody was there. I was beginning to get extremely scared at this point and didn't know what to do. I sat out on the couch watching the door and waiting for it to happen again. I must have been so exhausted, because next thing I knew, I was waking up to another loud thud knocking. This time, it was on the door leading out to my garage. I pulled up my app and nothing was there. This was ridiculous. I was exhausted and getting frustrated that whatever spirit this had to be was messing with me like this. At 4:15 a.m., I heard a rapid-fire knocking at the door. It seemed to go on for 10 minutes straight. Frustrated and mad, I jumped up and ran to the door, flung it open, and screamed, "What do you want from me?" As before, nothing was there, and nobody was around to have done this. I slammed the door and latched the devil and went and crawled back into bed. I was so over this whole night and put my earplugs in my ears to ignore whatever mischievous spirit was trying to keep me awake. While I was trying to fall asleep, I just prayed that it would all be over and that it would just leave me alone. I finally passed out, but that was short-lived. Next thing I knew, my bed is moving like something is clawing at the footboard, when suddenly I felt a cold, clammy hand around my foot. Its nails were long and sharp and sliced my skin to shreds. I tried to pull my foot back, but it grabbed my other ankle and was trying to pull me under the bed. When I opened the door, I must have invited whatever this entity was into my home. I knew better than to have opened that door, but all the knocking was driving me insane and I couldn't help it. It preyed on me and knew I was going to open the door after its persistent knocking. I don't know if it was all of the pain I was feeling on my ankles, but I must have passed out. My eyes began to open, feeling as though I hadn't slept a wink, and it is finally morning. I expected to pull back the covers and see blood and my sheets ripped to shreds, along with my flesh torn to bits. But that wasn't the case. I didn't have a scratch on me, and there has been no sign of any entity having even been in my room. It must have all been just a horrible dream. Suddenly, I hear another knock at the door. I run to the door and I look through the peephole. This time, it's the police. They knock again. I go to reach for the door and suddenly they open it. I stood there alarmed and looked at them and said, "May I help you?" They didn't respond. In fact, they walked right by me, shouting my name. "I'm right here. May I help you?" I say. They walk back towards my room, and one of them calls to another officer coming in the door. "She's in here. I found her body."
story's name is Awakened. So, here I go. It was a warm night, and I was playing video games. It was getting late, so I decided to log off and go to bed. I was asleep, but out of nowhere, I was woken by something. I didn't know what it was, but I decided to go use the bathroom, which was across from my room. After I was done using the bathroom, I heard knocking. Wait. Knocking. So I decided to go look. The knocking did not stop until I got to the front door. And outside of the door, I saw something glowing red outside. So then I ran back into my bedroom and slammed the door and started to try to fall asleep again. I was terrified, and then the morning came around. And I had to go to the store with my mom, and I walked in the bathroom at the store, and I saw the red glowing once again. So I was scared to death. I went to my mom, and she was checking out the groceries. So then we left the store to go home. When we got there, I got on my Xbox, and after about an hour, I got on my Xbox, I felt breathing on my neck. And I was confused because no one was in my room. So I turned around, and no one was there. So I got the chills and just sort of ignored it. And after I was done playing my Xbox, I decided to watch a movie with my family. After 30 minutes of starting the movie with my family, we decided to make some popcorn. And when I went out to my kitchen, all the cabinets were open. And I was like, that's weird. But still, made the popcorn. I went back and watched the movie, and after the movie... Wait, what? Watched the movie, and after the movie, it was time for bed. I was praying that what happened the night before didn't happen again. But once again, I woke up, checked my phone, it was 3:02 a.m. And believe it or not, I heard the knocking again. But this time, I ignored it and went back to bed. Luckily, nothing like that ever happened again, and I think it's because I ignored it, and whatever it was didn't come back.
Secrets of the School. Our van sat parked outside of St. James Academy for Boys, or what was left of it anyway. Tonight our paranormal investigator crew would be looking into the supposedly haunted school building that hadn't been used since the 1950s. Marcus, Margaret, Jim, and I, Thomas, were all gathering our equipment and getting ready to head inside. The school building was apparently privately owned by a family in this town, and they had fought to keep the building from being destroyed. Now locals are claiming the place is haunted, so they have an excuse to destroy it. Or at least that's what Deborah, the family matriarch, had to say about it over the phone. So in come my team and I to see if there's anything really is going on here. Everyone was now inside besides Margaret and I. She looked at me. I have a bad feeling about this one. Plus this town is weird. Teenagers are constantly going missing from here. Did you check out any of the news stories I sent you? Margaret was our historian, and she would delve pretty deep into our locations. I shook my head. Too much going on for me to have time to read them. I headed inside. The school had 2 above-ground floors and a basement. We decided to start on the ground floor. It was just starting to get dark, so all of the natural light from the building's windows was fading quickly. We all got out our night vision cameras and scanned the main hallway. At the end of the hall were 2 sets of double doors. One set led to the cafeteria and the other to the small gymnasium. Around us were several classrooms. Desks were scattered around and knocked over in each. There was graffiti randomly on the walls. Marcus started recording. He was usually the one to take the lead during our investigations. He called out into the darkness, "Is there anyone here with us?" His question was met with nothing but silence from all of our equipment. This was a repeating pattern for most of the night. Through every classroom, the gym, the cafeteria, even into the second floor where the library and more classrooms were. Eventually it came time to go down to the basement. Margaret had looked up the floor plans of the place before we got here, and we had a maintenance closet to get down to the basement. As we were searching, I heard the long, squeaky groan of the entrance door. I whispered, "Did anyone else hear that?" Everyone shook their heads no. Maybe I was imagining things, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were no longer alone. I found myself looking over my shoulder into the darkness as we moved. Eventually we found the maintenance closet. As soon as we opened it, I faintly smelled a scent that I had only been around once before. It reminded me of the body farm we had once investigated. It reeked of death. Something was wrong here. My nerves had gotten to me, even though we had found nothing so far. As we descended into the basement, I went last and closed the maintenance closet doors behind us, hoping we wouldn't be followed by whatever I had heard before. The basement had the quiet sound of electrical humming. It was cold and pitch black. To see anything, we all had to look through our cameras. It seemed to be mostly empty at first. Near the stairs, I noticed a large lever. It looked like something that would activate lights. I made note of it just in case. We spread out as Marcus started talking into the darkness again. As soon as he spoke, we heard a quiet, "Help us," from the darkness. I froze. It was too clear, too coherent. That didn't come from any of our equipment. I heard Marcus stop and quickly walk around the source of the sound. He started yelling, "Does anyone have a flashlight? I need a flashlight right now. This is an emergency." I didn't have a flashlight, but I remembered the levers I saw as we came in. I raced over to it and pulled it. One by one, the ceiling lights came on, starting from the stairs, heading further into the basement. When the last light turned on, I was able to see Marcus standing by a locked chain-link enclosure. Inside of the enclosure were 4 extremely pale people. They looked like teenagers, but I couldn't tell from the distance. I, Margaret, and Jen all ran over to Marcus. A small teenage girl in the enclosure was holding onto the side of it and looking up at us. All four of them were covered in dried blood, and it stained the concrete floor around them. The girl spoke to us again. "Help us, please." Her voice was quiet and weak. I didn't see a way into the enclosure, so I started to walk around. On the other side, I found a revolting sight. A pentagram that looked to be made of dried blood. It had half-melted candles and bones scattered inside. There were also strange symbols written all around it. "Margaret! I found a pentagram. Come here." I heard her running towards me. She stopped beside me. "Wait, that's not a pentagram. It's a pentacle." I have no idea what those other symbols are, though. I've never seen them before. A pentacle is used for protection, but I don't know what it's doing here. As Margaret and I were looking around, I heard Jim yell from nearby. "I found the door. It's got a padlock on it. If we can break it, we can get them out of here." I yelled back, "We have no tools. We need to get above ground so we can call the police." My cell phone had no signal in the basements, and I knew the same was true for everyone else. Suddenly, the EMF reader that I could hear crackling slightly started to make these terrible screeching sounds. It stopped just as suddenly as it began, and the room went pitch black. Then I could hear footsteps coming towards us.